How's it going, everyone? Welcome to this week's Q&A. So like any other week, if you want a chance on one of your questions being featured in a future video, make sure you do drop a comment down below with your question, and I'll try to get to each and every question either in your comment itself or in a future video, or I'll be working on a dedicated video for that question itself. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started with the first question of the week, and it is, how do we deal with water leaks? Sometimes water penetrates the inside of the vehicle. Sometimes it goes into your taillights. So when it's going into inside of the vehicle, we use a couple of different ways. I like to personally, obviously, try to isolate the issue. Normally, it's going to be coming from the highest point possible. We see a lot of windshields leaking, and a lot of times, moldings or seals or whatnot. So first things first, when a customer complains about a certain area, I try to duplicate it. I pull off a couple pillars, maybe an 8-pillar cover or, whatnot, whatever the situation is, and run it through the car wash. 9 out of 10 times, I'm going to be able to find it that way. And then obviously address it by replacing the seal, see if something's bent, see if something's distorted, or sometimes we've seen a couple different windshields leaking lately. And that won't really be known or shown through a car wash sometimes. A lot of times I'll actually take something that will bubble up, like some soapy water, some spray 9, and I'll spray it around the perimeter of the windshield, and I'll take some compressed air and blow from the inside out, and I'll find it that way. At that point, most likely the windshield's going to have to be replaced because the seal isn't correct in there, not enough sealant or whatever the case may be. Maybe the windshield shifted out of place during the manufacturing process, or whatever the case may be. And at that point, we'll recommend a windshield or a removal and reinstall if possible, but a lot of times they do end up breaking, so the windshield will have to get replaced. We don't do that. We hire somebody else to do that type of service. Now, if it's like lights and stuff like that, a lot of the times it's going to be the light itself. On older vehicles, maybe some of the foam that's just worn out or whatnot, so you replace the foam at that point. Now, if you don't want to be dealing with replacing it, if it's an older vehicle, you could drill a little hole in the light itself, remove it, drill a little hole, just so there's a drainage point. Obviously, that's not the correct way to fix it, but the light's really expensive, and it's a non-LED circuit light. If it's just regular bulbs, that would be okay. Anything with the newer cars, as soon as it detects some moisture, it could cause some other issues. The car could even break on its own, so you kind of have to pinpoint that and try to figure out what the best scenario is for you. So if it's a seal, if it's leaking through the door, at that point, either the seal is ripped or it's worn out, and you would just replace the seal that would need it to be replaced, and move on from there. And that should be the end of that. After whatever we replace is done, obviously if there was a large amount of water inside the vehicle, we try to dry it out, remove the carpet, dry it out, replace it if needed. It's been there for a while. If it's molded, depends on the situation. And after all that is completed, obviously we retest and make sure that we have fixed the leak and return the vehicle back to the customer. So hopefully that answers the question for you. So the next question is about the TLX Type S, and what are my thoughts on the transfer case issue. So there have been a couple of complaints, not even just the Type S models, but primarily the Type S models, both TLX and MDX, with the front transfer case basically stripping out the gear that connects the transfer case to the transmission itself, and it stripped out the case and makes the car at that point front wheel drive. So the gauge will display that it's sending power to all 4 wheels, but it's not. And this is very easily tellable by when you accelerate the car hard from like first or second gear, it'll spin the front wheels. And although it's showing that it's sending power to the front, being that the gear is essentially not doing anything, it's sending 0 power to the back. And obviously it's pretty obviously an issue. So at that point, we are starting to see some sort of a trend. If this does happen to you, you are going to have to get the transmission and the transfer case replaced, because they both stripped one another and damaged each other. So I think it's just probably some weak material that Honda has used, or Acura has used at this point. I've launched my car probably more than anybody out there, and this hasn't happened to me, knock on wood. Hopefully it doesn't happen. It has happened to stock vehicles as well, so no modifications at all. So my car has been modified probably since about, I think it was like 500 or 700 miles or so. I've got just about 28,000 miles now. I've done, again, well over 100 launches, and I've been good. I've been, problematic with that in my experience. Doesn't mean it's not happening. Obviously, we see that it's happening. I'm not sure if it's something that Honda or Acura is going to address in the future, or maybe they'll come out with some sort of warranty extension, but doesn't seem like there's, that many cases at this point to warrant some sort of a warranty extension or anything of that nature. Things are gonna break. That's gonna happen to any vehicle, and unfortunately, just something that we're probably gonna have to deal with on our own once these vehicles are out of warranty. Now, if your car is modified, obviously that's playing with fire. If this has happened to you, make sure you return your car as back to stock as possible, so they don't have any evidence or anything, any leverage against you to try to get your car warranted, even if it did directly or indirectly cause or not cause the issue itself. So hopefully that answers the question for you. All right, so the next question is maintenance minder light comes on. Let's say it's recommending a transmission service and you bought the vehicle used. You don't really know the history and there is no dipstick to see the fluid quality at this point. So that's obviously you don't know what's in there. My suggestion is replace it at that point. When you buy a used car, unless if there's 100% proof of records, you should be replacing these fluids anyways, and kind of start from fresh. Replace the fluids, replace the filters, replace the belts and hoses if needed. Anything rubber, anything that's a maintenance item. If you have like 30, 40, 50,000 miles, you should definitely be replacing it at that point. Obviously, if there's no dipstick, which most of these newer cars don't have a dipstick for the front transfer case, the rear differential, the transmission, etc. There's really no way to tell without actually doing the service and draining the fluid. At that point, it's too late. You're going to need to do it anyways. And just out of, erring on the side of caution, you should be doing these maintenance items regardless. So if you're not sure, my suggestion is 100% get it done and probably get the other fluids done at that time as well. So hopefully that answers the question for you. All right, so the next question is how to know if you have a bad wheel bearing. So a bad wheel bearing can be oftentimes mistaken with cupped or feathering tires. The noises could sound similar to an untrained ear. I almost 99 out of 100 times will be able to differentiate the both of them. Sometimes vehicles do need both, so that's definitely a possibility out there. First things first, if you're, it's usually a groaning type of sound. When it's, initially starting, it's very faint. And as it gets worse, as the miles rack up, obviously it's not going to get any better. It's only going to get worse. So it'll be more, it'll be louder. It'll be more persistent. It'll be at an earlier, miles per hour or kilometers per hour at lower speeds, essentially, and going up as, the speed increases. Now, again, it can be very easy and confused with a feathered or cupped tire. So if you suspect that you have a wheel bearing noise, the first thing I will do, lift up the car safely, or just take your hand and check for any uneven tire wear. And I don't mean worn on the inside and not on the outside. I would mean, feathering or a cupping situation where the tread is wearing like this. And you have highs and lows. That's what I would be personally looking for. If you have anything of that nature, sometimes it can be very subtle, and on a well-paved road or on a cement paved road, it could be even more noticeable. So a very minimal feathering or cupping at that point could be pretty loud and sound like a wheel bearing, and it's not. Sometimes it's very obvious, and I can tell just by looking at the tire from far away that tires are the issue. And again, you might also have a wheel bearing issue. But first things first, first contact of patch to the road is the tires. So you do that before anything. Again, we can see something physical. We're not going to assume there's a bad wheel bearing when we know for sure that the tires are bad. Even if you had a bad wheel bearing and you change the wheel bearing and not the tires, you're still going to have a noise. So if you know something is obvious, replace the tires and then proceed from there if needed. And that's what I tell my customers as well. Now, if you aren't sure, tires look okay, you could lift up the vehicle and spin the tires by hand or putting it into drive. If it's front wheel drive, the front wheels will spin. If it's rear wheel drive, the rear wheels will spin. And if it's all drive, all four wheels will spin. Obviously, use caution when doing any sort of testing like this. And simply try to use either a stethoscope or a feeling with your hands, and you can usually feel which wheel is causing the noise like that. Again, when it's initially starting, it might be hard to pinpoint. You may have to wait until it gets a little bit worse. And again, you can never rule out that you have more than one wheel bearing that's bad as well. So definitely a possibility. Also could be, for instance, a drive shaft bearing making noise, or a half shaft bearing making noise, or even a transmission I've seen making noise, and the noise is being sent out to the wheels, and you could have that situation as well. Typically, it's wheel bearings that go bad, and you could pinpoint it in that sort of way. I like to also apply the load on one wheel. What we'll do is disengage traction control all the way. Again, extreme caution must be used if doing this method. We disable traction control. We hold one wheel with a pry bar, and we spin it at the concerned speed that the customer is complaining about, and we could hear the wheel bearing. If you hold the one side, for instance, if you hold the passenger side and you hear the noise, that means it's the driver's side wheel bearing that's bad. Now, if you hold the driver's side and you hear the noise, that means the passenger side is bad. Now, if you hear noise when doing either or, then you could have a situation, once again, where you have multiple wheel bearings that are bad. There's also a possibility that you have all four wheel bearings go bad, right? Some people, noises don't bother them. You buy the car used, and you're like, oh, wow, this is horrible. And, it's just, to them didn't bother them, but to you it does. So that's definitely a situation likely not going to happen, that you have four wheel bearings that are bad, but it could happen, right? So that would be my recommendations, my suggestions. Again, people often confuse wheel bearings with bad tires. So that would be my first point, that first place that I would look for those types of noise. So hopefully that answers the question for you. All right, last but not least, question of the week. And again, if you want a chance for one of your questions being answered, make sure you do drop a comment down below with your question. And the question is, what are some maintenance tips for sunroofs and panoramic roofs? So I'm not a fan of either or, to be honest. I have it on both my cars and I don't use it. But, obviously people like these things. The pano roof is nice. You get a nice view, a nice sunlight, nice sky view at night. So it is nice to look at, but they do come with a lot of problems in my opinion. But some things you could do is routine maintenance. If you do open and close it pretty often, make sure that there is no debris on the track. Even if a little twig gets stuck in there, it could get jammed, it could bend something up, and then just, cause a whole bunch of issues. So that would be something every time you use, especially if you park under a tree, just take a quick look before you, close it up. Now, if you're on a highway, chances are nothing got in there. Once you're done, just park the car and close the sunroof or the panel roof, and you should be okay at that point. Another thing you're going to want to do is, again, if you park under trees, check for leaves, debris, stuff like that. That stuff ends up clogging the drains, and those seals are not 100% waterproof, and they will let some water go in there, hence why there are drains in there. So just once in a while, maybe every 6 months, depending on your situation, if you park underneath the tree, specifically so, more so in the fall and stuff like that, in the spring with a lot of pollen getting in there, make sure you're blowing out the drains gently. You don't want to disconnect them from their drain points. A lot of times it's rubber to tube to rubber again. So just keep that in mind, gently blow, and then you could test it by pouring some water down the drain and seeing if water is actually coming all the way down, usually by the wheel wells or somewhere in that area. So that's something I would do personally. Another thing you could do as these cars age is apply maybe Schnitzel grease to the seal. Just make sure it stays nice and soft, and adapts to the car in the opening as much as possible. It doesn't get brittle or anything like that. Schnitzel grease or any sort of rubber maintenance product that will keep the rubber nice and moist and nice and damp and stuff like that. You don't want to also slather this stuff in there because you don't want to use like white lithium or anything like that. That's going to attract a lot of debris and grease and cause you more issues than you need to. So don't overkill. Try to use Schnitzel grease or just some sort of moisturizer on the rubbers, and keep it simple. Don't go crazy, and that should definitely help you out in the long run. So with that being said, I'll catch everyone on the next one.